a lot of teams that aren't so great end up losing the identity, right? Like if they go down a bit, they forget to run the ball and they start allowing lapses in coverage. So a big thing for Northwestern, a key to this game is regardless of whatever that score is, you got to just keep running the ball. You got to emphasize your identity because there is a mismatch there. If you are this bully ball type of team that doesn't want to throw very much and just run the ball and contain the other team, you have to be able to stick with it, even if Raiola gets a few on you and you're down 14-0.
Welcome to Moving the Chains, a Northwestern football podcast. I'm your host, Claire Connor, and you're listening to WNUR Sports. Hello and welcome to another episode of Moving the Chains. It's Claire here, and I'm here with two of our new freshmen, Ansh Badani and Monica Riley, who are joining me for this episode. We're going to get into a recap of the Purdue game. We're going to talk about this Nebraska game coming up and some overall season trends. But guys, I'm so excited to have you on the pod for the first time. One of my favorite parts of the year at Northwestern is fall because of all of the new life pouring into WNUR Sports. And so, we're all going to get to know each other a little bit better at the Halloween party next week. But before that comes, I feel like podcasts are so much fun for me just because I get to know y'all. But I want to give our listeners the same experience. So, Ansh, we'll start with you. But just can you tell us a highlight of this week and a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and why you're in WNUR Sports?
My name is Ansh. As far as about me, I'm a huge football nerd. This is what I love to do. I love to get in the weeds. I love to watch film. I commentated my football team in high school, probably like most people in WNUR. I also helped coach in high school too and draw up some plays. So that's sort of my background of football knowledge.
And Monica?
Hi, my name is Monica. I'm from Arizona, and I joined WNUR because I really like baseball, and kind of similar to what he did, I commentated for baseball, so yeah. And I was a manager for the team, so that was just a little side thing I did. It was just commentating, but it was really fun.
Are you a D-backs fan?
Yes.
Nice. Okay. I'm spoiled. I'm from LA. People who listen to this podcast know that I'm a huge LA sports fan. Go Dodgers. Got to get that in there. But it's great to meet the two of you. We're going to get right into things and talk about this Purdue game. The Cats come out victorious 19-0. It's a dominant game. Obviously, Purdue's a team that is at the bottom of the Big Ten this year, but you still don't often see games that look like this in the Big Ten Conference. Yeah. Northwestern has the ball the vast majority of the time and has a significant lead going into halftime. And really there does not seem to be, a single point in this game where Purdue really has a hope of winning, especially after halftime. And so it's an excellent performance from the Cats, who now have a 4-game winning streak, beating Penn State the week prior, 22-21. That was a much closer game, but still a huge victory that is sort of breathing some life into a fan base that felt kind of hopeless about the season when things started off. And so now they have the opportunity to really go on a run heading into Nebraska. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the specifics of this game and some things that we noticed. For me, the biggest takeaway from this game and from the past 4 games that we've seen from Northwestern have just been that this team is finally really leaning into its identity and into the identity that Coach Braun and Lujan have really envisioned for it throughout the season, which is that it's relying on this run game in order to facilitate passing and to move the offense forward. You've got these nice slow drives that take time off the clock. And when you commit relatively few turnovers and you have an excellent defense that doesn't allow the other team to do much, that makes it really, really hard for the other team to win. And so, it's been fun seeing this team really lean into that identity and just, Hyman, Komolafe, and Reeder combining for 204 rushing yards and the defense limiting Brown to 31 yards in the air. Pretty fantastic. So, Ansh, I want to start with you. What are some things that you noticed from this game or from the past few games that are getting you excited?
I love that Northwestern is starting to embrace a bully ball mentality, right? You can sort of see, as they're heading into the game, the goal is to get to 40 carries, right? They're running the ball extremely well. They're getting big, explosive runs that are keeping the defense on the field. They're exhausting them. And like you mentioned before, the long drives. it's something that over the course of the game, you really can start to see these defenses fall apart. And ever since they lost to Oregon, they've really started to embrace that identity. Preston Stone has had 21 pass attempts or less in the last few games, and sort of keeping the game simple and focusing on bully ball has really proved well for him.
I think like exactly like what we said earlier, but like it was kind of weird that it was a shutout game, which I was like kind of surprised of, and like especially given that the rushing attack and the time of possession were like I think were a key thing I noticed was like by running the ball and like staying on the field, Northwestern's like kept Purdue's offense like to the side, and I think like Purdue's mistakes and like inability to convert in key moments like 3rd and 4th down were like fatal, and even through like Preston Stone had a modest day passing and Northwestern didn't need him to dominate through the air, but I think it was just all about establishing the run and controlling the tempo, which I think gave Northwestern the win or the momentum to like head into their next game.
Absolutely. I think Northwestern did a really good job of dominating the entire game. Having so many 3-and-outs early on in this football game really set the tempo. And it also opened up opportunities for the offense because Purdue's defense was on the field nearly the whole time. And that's absolutely exhausting. You're out there. It's pretty cold. It's pretty windy. And so that's, you're right that was definitely something difficult for them. I do want to talk about Preston Stone because, he's been the talk of the town this whole season. Obviously, a lot of people felt like, he wasn't delivering on the promise that they thought they were getting this, like one-of-a-kind transfer out of SMU. But I think he's shown a lot more poise recently. Obviously, had threw an interception in this game, just like didn't see the zone with Griffin Wilde, and there was no way that play was leading to anything other than an interception. So that was just like a frustrating moment for him. But, overall, the past 4 games, he's done a really good job protecting the ball, which has been so much better. 2 touchdown passes, really nice touchdown passes in this game. He's got some great moments, that one really deep pass to Hayden Elegon, beautiful to watch. And so he had, in an interview recently, he said that the most important stat is wins. The thing he's most concerned about isn't a number, it's a letter. It's the letter W. And so and so that's something that we've seen more from him just as a leader of this team and of this offense. And so I want to talk to you guys about his performance in the game. What are you looking for from him heading into the future? What do you think can be improved, and what improvements are you excited about?
Like I mentioned before, like simplifying it and keeping it easy. Like he has his wide receiver 1, Griffin Wilde, who's has like over 500 yards in the year and 5 touchdowns, but with no real receiver 2 emerging for the team. It's just you make it so that you find that first read with Griffin Wilde, or you either get out of the pocket and you make a play. It's finding a way to simplify the game. Ever since that first game with Tulane, where he had 4 interceptions, right, the team was able to figure out how to win. It was just through running the ball. I think this is the first game they've won while Preston Stone had an interception. So all that matters for him is just limiting the turnovers. Let the game be won through the ground and move forward from there.
I think the next step for Stone is like to tighten up his accuracy, and like with them passing like too many drives, like stall on his missed short throws, and I think you can see like the reads are there, but he just needs to like get the cleaner ball placement that will keep the rhythm going. So
yeah, there's definitely there's still some concerns with accuracy in Preston Stone. He'll often kind of overthrow or underthrow his guys, and there have been a few miscommunications in the past few games where it's just like someone is running the wrong route, and you can tell that there's like something that went on that wasn't supposed to happen with his play. But I think overall he's improved and looked a lot more confident, and he's also looked so much more mobile. Preston Stone is someone who, coming into Northwestern, it was clear that this is a standard pocket passer, and he needs a little bit of time, and I think that's why he got passed up for the starting job at SMU, was that's not something that was highly compatible with their offense, and it also wasn't necessarily compatible with Northwestern's O-line to start off the season. But he's looking so much better at handling pressure overall, and so that's been a welcome change. In terms of just some of the coaching and decision making, I know that a lot of folks were a little bit upset about some of the play calls, especially on that first drive, and giving Ryan Bowe the ball on 3rd and 4 when you're this close to a touchdown just feels like a missed opportunity. But I think overall, when you're having such a dominant game, some of those mistakes can maybe slide into the background a little bit.
Yeah. Speaking of mistakes, that whole fourth quarter was a little bit rough on both sides. There's definitely a lot of things Northwestern needs to tighten up, like not just from Stone. We had, there was a big fumble earlier in the fourth quarter, which could have given Purdue life had they not been playing so poorly the entire game. But in general, just like I said before, just tightening things up and letting them embrace that's going to be better.
Absolutely. Any other some just like last comments on this game before we sort of start to get into some comparison, talking about Nebraska?
As far as like the defensive line play from Northwestern, it was really good this game. Obviously, it's great whenever you can get a defensive line interception. It boosts the morale for everybody. But limiting Purdue and just not letting them run the ball at all was honestly really impressive. Just keeping them off the field the entire game, forcing them to have to try and pass the ball. And you could tell their quarterback was just super uncomfortable throughout. When you look at that third down interception, it just clearly wasn't seeing the field right. Northwestern got into his head.
I think in the fourth quarter, like, Northwestern's defense showed, like, why the team is, like, built to finish these games. And, like, these, like, forced turnovers, 2 sacks, and, like, tackles for loss, and that execution under the pressure within Purdue.
Yeah, definitely a solid performance from the Cats. I do want to get into talking about Nebraska, and I feel like the D-line is an excellent sort of starting point to talk about that because that's a mismatch between these two teams. So let's talk about the Huskers. One of the key points of comparison that we have that could kind of allow us to evaluate this matchup a little bit is Minnesota, because Minnesota played Purdue right before Northwestern did, and now Minnesota played Nebraska right before Northwestern did. And so we can sort of look at some of the differences here. Purdue held Minnesota to 30 rushing yards, and they threw for 200 yards. Northwestern, if you kind of flip the stats around in both directions, Northwestern didn't let Brown throw for more than 31 yards. Obviously, he wasn't in for the full game, but compared to the yardage that he can sometimes get, which is like well over 200, that was a crazy comparison. And Northwestern rushed for 200 yards. And so, you're looking at kind of a total mismatch in what these teams have both produced against, or in what Purdue produced against Minnesota. And then Minnesota beats Nebraska 24-6. So part of this is just like, welcome to the Big Ten West. It's crazy out here, the Wild West. But part of this is also that there are signs that Northwestern had a much more dominant game against Purdue than Minnesota did. And Minnesota absolutely routed Nebraska. So, some other weaknesses to talk about with this Nebraska team. Obviously, Dylan Raiola is fantastic, but he doesn't have the strongest protection. And that's where Northwestern comes in. When you've got such a solid D-line, there's a lot that you can do to limit an offense that is really struggling with running the ball. And then, floating on top of this is, this sort of question mark around coaching. Because, Matt Rule gave, pretty much a politician's answer to the question about Penn State that he got in his press conference. But it's pretty clear that, depending on how this season goes, that, he would be a key option for the Nittany Lions. And so there are question marks this program is going to have around him. So they're kind of at a weak point and at an inflection point, just as Northwestern is coming into town. They're still a fantastic football team. And they, played a great game, have some great games this season. So I don't want to harp too much on these weaknesses, but I want to talk to each of you. How are you feeling going into this game? What do you think the Cats need to be worried about? What should they be feeling solid about? And what are just some of your overall predictions?
I'm going to focus on the defensive side of it. You mentioned that their offensive line really isn't great. It's probably the biggest weakness of that team. So I think Northwestern, on some of these third downs, whenever you're playing one of these star quarterbacks who can always find a way to make a play out of nothing, so much of it comes down to is your coverage sound on the back end, right? And that's a big thing. You cannot allow Raiola to make too many big plays on you. Something that I think that will help is I've been seeing with the last few games the way Northwestern sort of run some of their blitzes. It's really fun to watch. They do this thing called mug, which, if you aren't aware, it's like showing the 4 defensive linemen and then having 2 linebackers walk up to the line of scrimmage. And what that allows you to do is you can either send in those backers for a blitz, or you can have them drop and drop into coverage, and that really does mess with the quarterback and messes with the offensive line's protection. So when you're going in with Nebraska, who already has not the greatest offensive line, to say the least, there's certainly a lot of opportunities for that. So Raiola will get his a few times. That's inevitable. It's like whenever you play, I don't want to bring up Mahomes when you're talking about Raiola, of course. There's plenty of jokes made about that. But whenever, on a serious note, whenever you do play someone like that, it's inevitable that they're going to have a few plays where you just sort of throw your hands up in the air and you're like, well, what are we going to do about that? And that's inevitable. But if Northwestern is able to sort of fight through those and find a way to keep putting pressure on him, I think that they have a chance in this game.
And I will say with Raiola, this is a guy who can keep his head up. I mean, you look at that Michigan game, which was a really fantastic game for Nebraska, even though, I mean, they lost by 3 points, or they lost by a field goal, but still, Raiola got sacked, 7 times in that game?
Yeah.
And, you know, he still just looked so poised and really kept going. He had, like, over 300 yards in that game, and so he's someone who does kind of know how to say, okay, like, you know, next set of downs, like let's get there, let's compartmentalize. And so, you know, Northwestern maybe can get some momentum shifts or can really fluster you just because of how solid this D-line is. And Raiola is sort of a unique threat in that regard because he's somebody who can keep his head so steady. Yeah. But still, overall, when you're reliant on airing out the ball, that's not going to go too well for you against this Northwestern defense because there's just so much pressure. And so Northwestern has done a good job of, you know, establishing the ground game and using that to open up options down the field. And when Nebraska can't do the same thing, that's a crucial mismatch. So we'll have to see, how that looks. And you know, in the same in the same sense, there's aspects of this Northwestern offense that sometimes also lack balance. And so this should be a pretty interesting game. Monica, any thoughts?
Are we talking about like Nebraska's defense and like, I think their defense is really good. Like they allow like relatively few passing yards. Like have shown ability to get after the quarterback, and like their run defense is valuable. Like they allow 156, I'm assuming, yards per game on the ground and struggling to like get consistent push against a team that run with intent. Like their red zone defense is like among, I think, one of the worst ones. And like opponents score at a high rate like inside the red zone, like strengths, like I think their strengths are like ability to defend a pass, potential to disrupt like pressure, and like their weakness is like run defense, depth, and front line, which give up longer drives and red zone lapses. So, yeah.
I think, Monica, you made a good point there. Nebraska's run defense, which we discussed before, really isn't good. And we talked about the identity for the last few games, and this is one of those times where you have this identity. You're riding off this 4-game win streak. This is a real chance to go prove yourselves if you're Northwestern. And I think a lot of teams that aren't so great end up losing the identity, right? Like if they go down a bit, they forget to run the ball, and they start allowing lapses in coverage. So a big thing for Northwestern, a key to this game, is regardless of whatever that score is, you got to just keep running the ball. You got to emphasize your identity because there is a mismatch there. If you are this bully ball type of team that doesn't want to throw very much and just run the ball and contain the other team, you have to be able to stick with it. Even if Raiola gets a few on you and you're down 14-0, you got to make sure you stick it out.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think looking at especially this Purdue game where there are a few moments where it's like, okay, like, did the Cats really need to fake the punt there? Like, was that something that was really a foolproof plan? Ryan Bowe, are you dead serious? You know, like there are a few moments where it's like, oh, that's like a little cute for what this is, but it's okay because when you have the ball basically the whole game and you give up no points, then you have a little bit more flexibility to kind of test some things out and to say, okay, like test kitchen, you know, let's cook. Yeah. But I think Nebraska, like this is a team that is so punishing because even if their defense isn't that strong and even if Raiola faces a ton of pressure, they'll still rack up so many passing yards that they can outscore you. And that's part of why they, you know, were able to put so much pressure on Michigan. And so it's still, you know, this is still potentially a really difficult game for the Cats, and there are a lot of areas where they're going to need to be more disciplined, you know, not just in the way that they play, but also in the play calls. And so before we wrap things up, let's just do a little bit score prediction. Ansh, we'll start with you.
I can kind of see this going one of two ways. If Northwestern, like I mentioned before, sticks to that identity and takes control of the game, they could win this one 20-14 through like an ugly, sloppy game that, most of like the average fan wouldn't really enjoy. But if they can't contain Raiola, if he gets out on them, it could get ugly. So then I could see something like 37-21. I'll be more optimistic, and I'll choose the 20-14 route because they do have the pieces. They really do match up with them pretty well. So if they can just stick to the run game, they'll be fine.
My score prediction is Northwestern 27, Nebraska 17. I think because like Nebraska's like home field is like stronger passing offense, like give them the edge. But I think Northwestern's like defense and ground game to keep it competitive. I don't think that they'll get blown out at all. So,
all right, I'm somewhere in this mix. I said 24-14. I think that when you look at the Minnesota game that just happened and you sort of compare some of the strengths and weaknesses of these different teams, I think Nebraska definitely has it in them to bounce back from where that was. I think they're going to score more than 6 points, which is pretty abysmal, and look a lot better in this game against Northwestern. And also, this is a home game. This is a big moment for them to prove something coming off of a loss like that. But, looking at Penn State as another team that suffered a pretty embarrassing loss before facing the Cats, Northwestern, on the road was still able to pull out a win. And so, maybe the score will be closer than what I predict, but I think this is an offense that's, really finding its stride and that's going to be able to put a lot of pressure on Nebraska and score, more than they did potentially against Purdue. And also a defense that's going to be able to at least somewhat limit what, the absolute wizardry of Dylan Raiola. So that's what I'm thinking. It's been so much fun having you guys on this podcast, and thank you so much to everyone for listening. You can listen to this call of the Nebraska game on WNUR Sports at 11 Central this Saturday. Ethan Siegel and Adam Beck will be on the call, and as always, tune in to Moving the Chains after the game so that you can catch up on everything that happened and also enjoy a nice preview of the USC game that's coming up after, which I will be calling with our dear friend Patrick Winograd. And so that episode actually will go up sometime sooner over the weekend after that game happens, so stay tuned for it. But for now, thank you for listening, and as always, go Cats.